All right, so let's get started and we'll jump into sleep by kicking us off with this video.
Sleep studies shine the light on one of the most critical performance
Sorry about that.
predictors: sleep. When working on the Human Performance Project, John Underwood said, "You could not begin to imagine how important sleep is to your performance capacities. Sleep is the single most significant factor in trainability, recovery, and performance." Worldwide sleep research has made it clear that sleep is an absolute predictor of performance. It's simple. The more you sleep, the better you play. In sports, your stats can go up and down based on how much you sleep. Despite the critical importance of sleep on our health function, performance, and quality of life, insufficient or inadequate sleep is an epidemic in the United States. You might think athletes would consider sleep essential to performance, but countless surveys over the past 2 decades continue to show sleep deficits in athletes that prevent optimal performance. We have seen huge sleep debt issues in middle school and high school athletes, with an average of only 6 hours and 40 minutes of sleep per night. The NCAA surveys indicate that most collegiate athletes are likely to show up on a college campus with compromised sleep patterns and sleep deficits. The more you train, the more you need sleep. It is during sleep that recovery, restoration, and repair take place. Much of your training effects actually takes place at night during deep sleep. You could do a great workout and then minimize sleep and have most of it washed away, wasting your time, effort, and energy. Sleep regulates most of what we do during our waking hours. Energy levels, energy use, and appetite are all regulated by sleep cycles. Mood is also regulated by sleep. Grumpiness, irritability, and impulsivity are just a few mood states that are impacted by sleep. A 2016 study with Baylor U football examined sleep quality and how it impacts critical training parameters. When sleep quality was down, mood was down. Players were negative, unmotivated, and unenthused. When sleep quality was down, perceived exertion RPE was up, meaning a physical act that is normally easy seems very hard. This means low sleep equals no off-the-line speed or explosive power. When sleep quality is low, soreness is increased and overall quality of movement will decline. You stay inflamed and it sets you up for impending injury. These are all connected, and deep sleep is the controlling variable. A high school study on hours of sleep and GPA showed the more you sleep, the higher your grades. Students who stay up late studying actually end up with lower GPAs than those who study and then get sleep. This is because much of the memory capacity depends on deep sleep to download short-term memories to the long-term in order for recall. The problem with minimizing sleep is that you build up sleep debt. You can get used to it and over time begin to function at that level as your new normal. If you are tired most of the time, you can get used to being tired. But you will likely be far from your optimal performance potential. The most prolific sleep studies done in high-level sports were held at Stanford by Sherry Ma. During this study, she worked with basketball players and swimmers. Her research revealed that basketball players all ran faster and made more shots over a period in which they slept at least 10 hours a night. And swimmers swam faster, had faster start times, and more kicks, all contributing to faster races. She concluded that sleep is an absolute predictor of performance. The more you sleep, the better you play. Even though they can give you a short burst of energy, energy drinks are actually wrecking your energy long term. Regular consumption of energy drinks increases the risk of many negative effects, such as cardiac arrest, depression, diabetes, and narcolepsy, among many others. What you do in your spare time is up to you, but there is no question that the brain and body are highly fatigued after a long day. Staying up even later, using technology and bombarding the brain with more stimulation is not the answer. The number one cause of lack of sleep is blue light from your phone, TV, and computer screens. Blue light can make it challenging for your brain to rest. Even just 1 minute of blue light exposure can cause sleep disturbance. Sleep and the restorative processes await your systems.
right, so that's just a small snippet and overview of some of the content that we're going to be diving into this next hour. And I want to open that again. There we go. I'm going to pass it over to our co-sponsors at Libertyville High School, our Life of a Wildcat program. Welcome, students. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Nelson, for helping us host this event. I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right, so welcome back. We're honored again to host an ILHPP Performance Academy session with John Underwood.
On behalf of Life of a Wildcat, which really means all things prevention and wellness at Libertyville High School, we want to thank John Underwood and the ILHPP for this opportunity to learn about how we can all be happier, healthier, and higher performing in our sports, activities, fine arts, and academics.
We had a lot of really good feedback from the last session we hosted and look forward to a new generation of Wildcats inspired by performance science.
John, we are inspired by your work. And we wonder if before we launch into sleep and recovery, we could share just a little bit about your work at the Sport Institute of Finland and how much that inspired the Human Performance Project. Then we will launch our starter question.
You want to know? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead and answer that question and then you answer. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you know, it's like when I went to study in Europe, this was in the 1980s, Finland had the best sports science programs in the world. And even then they weren't looking into things like this. They were looking more into, you know, performance capacities, endurance and you know, force development and speed development. And, you know, they were doing studies on muscles and heart and lungs and just, they were doing stuff that no other countries were doing. And it's sort of cool now to think back that we went in a different direction. I've used all those kinds of studies that I learned from in Finland, but we went in another direction and started looking at smaller and smaller things. And you know, I've said this a lot of times, and I don't know if you kids listening have ever heard me say it, but your career is like a 1,000-piece puzzle. And, you know, when you're a young athlete, you don't even have all the pieces. And every time you get a new piece, you put it in place and you're better just because of that. And, you know, it was an incredible opportunity for me because I was the first person ever allowed to study in that sport institute. And I really, I look back now and think, oh, man, that's what really led me to do all the things that I did in my 42 years of work. So that's it.
Good training habits and a science-based training plan are so important, but you spent many years measuring what happens away from training. What have you discovered?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that right off the top, I could talk about this for a long time, even for days. You know, talking about recovery, it's the biggest missing piece to most athletes training or musicians, artists, students, is like what happens when you're not putting in all the time, effort, and energy. And I think one of the big things is that a lot of people think that you can just hammer and hammer and hammer, whether you're trying to learn and cram information into your head you know, and memorize stuff, or whether you're trying to train and put in the miles if you're an endurance athlete, or you know, hit the weight room and just keep, you know, punching it out day after day after day. And what I can tell you this is a lot of people, you know, think you're a machine, and you're not. And you'll break down way sooner than metal parts on a machine will. Injuries and sickness and overtraining and even subpar performance, where you just go into a flat level where you're just not improving, or maybe you're having really disappointing results. And that could be anything. It could be music, art, dance, studies, and of course, sports. If you're going to push it and train really, really hard, you have to rest really, really hard. And I think that's something I was a compulsive overtrainer in high school and college. And even though I got good results, I think back now, I would have included so much more rest. And, you know, sleep wasn't really an issue for me. I grew up in a really structured lifestyle as far as sleep. And my parents really, you know, hammered that on the 4 boys in our family that were athletes. But you have to rest. If you don't rest, it all, like they said in the video from Athlete Committed program, a lot of it gets washed away. There's 3 parts to anything that you're training for, whether it's, academics or sports, music, art, dance, anything. There's stress, like we push ourselves. That's how you get to the higher and higher level. But then you have to recover from the stress because there's so much trauma and damage from it. And after you recover from it, then you get the adaptation. Either you're smarter, or you learned more, or you can do things you couldn't do as far as skills, or you're faster, or you have greater endurance. And that's really a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio: stress, recovery, and adaptation. If I looked at that equation, the 2 most important parts are that you stress yourself at the right intensities, and that you recover from it. And the biggest problem with getting the adaptation always ends up being that people don't recover. So that's just off the top, the answer to that first question, and it's a good question. I think as we talked about this, I just jotted down some ideas on like what direction I want this to go, and then we'll get into it. First of all, for sleep and recovery, we talk about these at the same time, and I think Kip North talked about this early before we started these, is the 2 things just go together. Most of the recovery processes kick in at night when you're in sleep. And it's not just when you're falling asleep, it's a deep kind of sleep, which is actually called REM, which is rapid eye movement sleep. The importance of sleep in recovery and training and performance, I'll talk about that. I'll show you guys some research and data that goes along with what you saw in the video. It's not going to be repetitive because there's so much data now on sleep. That you guys all need to realize, whether you were a youth sport, middle school athlete, a high school athlete, or an NCAA athlete, you're still growing. You're in the last stages of growth right now. And, mature people are ahead of the curve, and physically immature people are on the other end, but, you're still growing. And this is a really important time, and sleep is right smack in the middle of it. Another one is learning and cognitive roadblocks. You look at data now that they have on academics and GPAs, and some of those were in that video too. We even found some of those and took some of those things into consideration when I worked on the Navy SEAL project. I mean, you can imagine, the processes that these guys go through, where they have to make, decisions in a millisecond that are life and death. A lot of it was, how do we make this cognitive learning and reaction and all these things? How do we make it optimal? So we had to do a lot of work with them on trying to monitor how much sleep they were getting, and sometimes they can't get sleep if they're on ops. So also repair and injuries, sleep hygiene, and some things that could help you have better sleep hygiene, meaning healthy sleep habits, and how regular they are. I'll get into that later with asking people, like, what's your normal bedtime? Is there one? Some people have lots of them. And then sleep disturbances, and a little wrap up in the end. So if you go to my first slide, which is actually slide number 2, I think, for Kira. Yeah, that's it. The biggest thing is repair, recovery, reloading a lot of your systems, and rebooting. Like we reboot our computers if something gets hung up, or there's a glitch. A lot of times it's automatic now, and same thing happens when you're asleep. Growth of muscles, organs, brain, central nervous system. All your skills for any physical skills, whether it's playing a guitar or a musical instrument, or dance, or accuracy with fine hand movements for artists, or memorizing in classroom, or in the play, or for music. The biggest recovery factors for sport, cool the body down. And I'm talking even core temperature, really critical. The longer the core temperature stays up, the more damage there is. And that's even damage in your organs and human muscle. Calming the body down, heart rate has to return to normal. Blood pressure has to return to normal. The brain eventually gets to rest sooner or later, or it crashes, or becomes ineffective. And what they know from studies that were done at University of Rochester in New York here is that at night your brain floods with like cleansing cerebral spinal wash, where it washes residue out of your brain. I remember having some some of my best races the next day, feeling like you had brain fog. Or I'll give you kids the same scenario. You study and you study and you study and you go take an exam, and for days afterward, you sometimes feel like you have this brain fog where your clarity of thought is greatly diminished, and it goes away eventually. But that's what happens when you do a lot of cognitive function, even is whether it's physical or thinking functions. If you overload the brain and central nervous system, you can have days where you're trashed mentally. And to talk to you guys a little bit about REM sleep, the deepest kind of sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. When you go into REM, most of these things kick in, all these functions of repair and recovery. Neurotransmitters are repleted or refueled. Hormones, reboot. Those most important hormones you need to train physically, so you feel like you got some pep and spunk and you feel strong and powerful. And after a real hard physical trauma, you feel that those hormones are down. You feel weak and tired and you struggle. So that all happens at night when you're in REM sleep. And the biggest factor, for the brain is that central nervous system readiness, this charge that your brain has to have, that builds up when you're in REM sleep. And, out of a whole 8 hours of sleep, you probably get in 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours that you're actually in REM, where those brain waves are rapid eye movement, deep sleep, where all these things happen. So, the total time you sleep, it's not 8 hours you're getting to reboot it. It's about 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours of it. So brain and body and energy systems depend on it. If you go to slide 3, we've tried for over 20 years to educate worldwide populations on sleep. And, I got hooked into things I never expected, the military projects and, a national ballet company, Cirque du Soleil, that they had thousands of performers. They took a lot of our materials. But here's just a page out of one of our books. You can see over on the left-hand side of the slide, sleep and central nervous system readiness, and some quotes and stuff. But even I look at these materials, I haven't seen these in years, but the top one is blood flow in the brain. That's 2 different people. The one on the left slept 8 hours. You can see the blood flow all around the front of the brain. And the person on the right-hand side in the blue, you can see that there's very little blood flow. That's what happens when you pull an all-nighter. And the next day you feel confused and you can't focus and you can't pay attention and you feel like your brain's just not functioning. It's no different than a battery that doesn't have any charge left in it. So think about that. And then at the bottom, this is just an example. There's that red brain on the bottom, 2 scans. On the left is the amount of brain engaged when you're on the internet. You can see it's pretty lit up. And the other one is somebody reading, which is like more of a static, mental process than when you're on the internet. When you're on the internet, you're just thinking, oh, okay, where can I go from here? And your brain's going a mile a minute. So it engages a lot more energy output than a static thing like just reading. That's why they say, pleasure reading just before you go to bed is actually really good for the brain, because the brain sort of calms down. And during the day, your guys' brains are lit up like all day long. So it only can last so long. Average high school athlete, you heard in that video, it was sleeping about 6 hours and 40 minutes. We gathered that data because we had some statewide programs. We did it it was about 29 states that we were working in. So it wasn't something that's geographical in the Northeast or something where I was living and working. So anyway, that's that. If you go to my next slide, don't ever think that when you crash and burn, that's rest. It's not rest. It's not sleep. It's not recovering. It's not going to help you. Just one of my quotes, and I've got lots of them. This is the difference between what you say you want and what the most and what will prevent it from ever happening. You have to take into consideration some of these things are just critical, and why people will buy into good equipment and good training methods and all these things, and then shortchange themselves on these things, which are probably even more important. You can't do it all. I know the pressure that's on you kids to be a great student and get in the awesome school and have a bright future and be a great athlete and be fantastic in every walk of life. And it's unfair that you're under that pressure. I talk all the time in front of parents and kids at these seasonal meetings and try to get them to realize, come on, people can only take so much. And we'll talk about that next time in our mental wellness approach materials that we produce. But getting used to being tired is easy, and you can not even see it coming. And all of a sudden you're just at this subpar performance level, and you start to think, okay, well, that's where I am. And it's not just what you give to be successful and to be at your best, it's what you give up. And I think that another side of it that's more up the alley of, and in your kids' wheelhouse is excuses like, I can't get sleep. I have all these things to do. You have to find a way to do it. Excuses sound great to the people making the excuses, but it's not going to help you. So if you go to my next slide, we just dropped this slide in because, Sherry Ma, you heard the name. Look up the Stanford sleep studies. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but here's a capsule summary from Sherry Ma's work. And she was the first sleep scientist to actually document athletes while they're training and competing. And a couple of their teams played for the national championship that year. One of them was their women's basketball team. They lost to UConn in the championship game, but they had a heck of a year. She started putting out sleep dynamic surveys to athletes. Okay, like, when do you go to bed? What time do you get up? Did you get up during the night and have disturbances? Even if you had to get up at night to go to the bathroom, that's a sleep disturbance. Onset of sleep, how the total sleep, the disturbances. And what she found was that people who slept more, it was a universal effect. Every single person on every single team that got more sleep, their performance went up, their stats went up. And when they got less, their normal sleep, which for college kids is 5-6 hours a night, you'll all find that out, unfortunately, but not if you're smart. Their performance went down. And one of the big things they also started to document was neural drive signal. The signal from your brain and your central nervous system to your muscles starts wigging out. You start having like signals that don't last, or signals that don't get through, or huge physical errors. And when we look at these critical movements you have to make in high level performance, they just aren't there, or they're there randomly. So and last but not least, the ability to react. And we even started doing those studies on reaction time. So I pulled a little a slide out, and it's not on this slide that Kira put up for you guys, but they started using wearable apps, sleep apps, and one of them was called Whoop. And they're inexpensive, and you can wear them, and it tracks how much time you're in REM and all this stuff. It's pretty cool. We started telling top athletes, I was in residence at the Olympic training centers for a lot of my programs. And I told athletes, if you're training twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, you got to get as much as 9 hours and 15 minutes of sleep. And you can't just go from where you are up to 9:15. You have to gradually get more and more sleep. So I actually looked one up on an athlete. I remember he had terrible sleep issues. Here's what it came out to. He spent 8 hours and 18 minutes in bed, but he fell asleep at 11:16 at night. He woke up at 6:48 because they get up in the morning to train. These guys, they're training professionally. And his obtained sleep was 6 hours and 30 minutes. It's just not enough. And here comes injuries. Here comes crud performance. Here comes lots of problems. And they also documented at the same time with these dynamic studies and sleep survey studies that nights prior to competing competition, of course, sleep is diminished. And that's because people have all that anticipation and nervousness and so forth. So if you go to my next slide, I'm not going to read this to you guys, but you can read down through them. These were our sleep surveys that we did with kids your age. So this is middle school and high school athletes. This is where the 6 hour and 40 minute sleep thing came from. but just a couple of them, 37 people, 37% wake up sore and inflamed. 31% said they seldom get a good night's sleep. Well, maybe that's the great athlete, great student, great everything that just has given up on trying to get sleep. But I can tell you this, you'd be greater than you are if you would start to get it. 39% awake and feeling unrefreshed, fatigued, or tired. So you can read through some of those. If you go to my next one, here's one to
John.
remember. Yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second and see if the
Sure.
kids, I just want to get a feel for how many hours of sleep maybe they got last night compared to what your 6 hours and 40 minutes is.
Yeah.
So let's hear it. True honesty. Either show me with your fingers or you can try and shout it out. Maybe the fingers would be best. So we're not screaming and shouting. How many hours you got?
What, we have 3, 5, 7, 7, 7, 6,
Yeah,
6,
I'm seeing some sevens.
7, 8. Oh, good job. Ryan got 8. Did anybody else get 8?
I got 8.
Oh, got 8. All right.
It's rare, it's just rare. And, I can't begin to tell you, like, you can get so used to being tired so quickly. You'll find it out later when you become an adult. Maybe someday you'll become an adult and you'll have your own child and you'll bring a baby home from the hospital. You'll really find out then. But anyway, you lose sleep, you go into sleep debt. And this is Sherry Ma's term. And once you're in sleep debt, performance goes down and it's there at a lower level. And you start to think that's where you are. And you start to think that that's your new normal, and it is, but you're nowhere near where you could be. So when you think about critical levels of energy that really start and emanate from the brain and central nervous system, I'll give you a quote, and this is another one of mine. Lost recovery is lost training effect in anything, and lost training effect is lost performance ultimately. So it's like a downward spiral. And there's 2 scenarios we came up with, and we were working with different populations. Is that people have trained too hard and they don't recover, or people have recovered too little, meaning they haven't done the things that could help them recover, so the money would eventually go in the bank. To go train every day and put in all that time, effort, and energy and not improve, it's frustrating. And no, it's no different than if you study and you study and you study and you go and you do terrible on the test, or you train and you train and you train and you get slower, or you were a starter and all of a sudden you're sitting the bench. You got to figure it out, and the place to start to figure it out are some of these things. So you can go to my next slide. I took people who got 1.5 hours or more less sleep than normal at the Olympic Training Center, Lake Placid. Before they went to breakfast, they'd come to the lab. I'd just do a simple reaction test with this system called Omega Wave. And we saw that the drop after losing 1.5 hours or more sleep. And of course, some people had 2 hours sleep, 3 hours sleep for whatever reason. It dropped from 0.186, 186 thousandths of a second, to 0.246. Well, that's huge if you're talking performance. And actually, that was with hockey players. And hockey players, I think your reaction time of 186, and you're a goalie, and you're tired, and it's 246. Well, the puck, if you want to find it's in the net behind you. So go to my next slide. We also started to look, okay, how long does energy and energy systems last in muscle and brain, and being able to do skills over time and cognitive function. You can do thinking skills and thinking cognitive function, like brain stuff, paying attention, focus, all that, for about 14 hours a day. Of course, you have to be rested when you start. Physical performance, 2 to 3 hours. I mean, you use up your brain's reserves in about 2 to 3 hours. And most athletes don't train 2 to 3 hour sessions. They'll break up their training into a smaller session and so forth. So there are limits to performance. And if you read what it says, the human body was meant to be up for 16 hours a day and down for 8. So whoever that was, Brenda, in your room that got 8 hours, bravo. And the rest of you, your performance for mental and physical performance, even if you had a good day, is degraded. So there you go. Next slide. And we just popped this slide in. So I just wanted to show you an example. The interesting part of this slide is that it's a person who has declined sleep to get 6 hours of sleep a night over time. And so the gradual decline in their performance, it just gradually goes down, and you don't even see it or feel it, but it's happening. And what happens is, your effectiveness drops and your reaction time drops. And all of a sudden your performance is gone way down and you're not performing. And here's a person, and what the unique part of this decline is that they measured this at 3 o'clock. So when you guys go to practice at 3, I'm guessing some days when you go to practice or your after school activities, you're fried, you're tired, you're fatigued, you just feel it, you're exhausted. That's why we instituted a lot of our studies on naps. A 10-minute nap can bring you back, alertness levels back about 30%. So next, if you go to the next one, this is from our project in New Hampshire. We have New Hampshire Life of an Athlete program. They've been running it for years now. They did a study on kids, they did the sleep surveys, and then they just looked at kids' GPAs. And kids that pulled all-nighters, their GPA was a 295, and kids who studied and then slept, especially got extra sleep too, how they figured it out. Their GPAs on comparison was about a 3.20. That's huge. The original study I saw on this and showed was it was at the service academies for the U.S. military, either West Point or Naval Academy, and they would only let them get 6 hours of sleep a night. And this was around 2000. They started letting them get 2 extra hours of sleep, and their GPAs of everybody at the academy went up like dramatically. So, all right, next, this is why. There's a processor in your brain, just like there's a processor in your computer that when you hit save, the computer saves stuff. Well, your processor is the hippocampus. And that area of the brain is actually like the processor. And when you don't sleep, when you pull an all-nighter, it deactivates it almost entirely. Up on the top of the graph, just to give you what the graph is, the green is learning capacity. That's the person who slept normal sleep, whatever that would have been. And the red is about 40% loss of their learning capacity because they pulled an all-nighter. On the bottom is the signal in the brain, in the hippocampus, that part that is what actually downloads the information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So it's like, bang, it's on the hard drive. And the green is the hippocampus activity. And in the people who pulled an all-nighter, they could not even find a signal in the hippocampus. So, I mean, you're dead in the water if you pull an all-nighter, if you want to really look at focusing on cognition or thinking abilities. So now, if you go to the next slide, I guess you guys probably have had enough science to understand that our brain has these liquid chemicals in it called neurotransmitters. There's lots of different kinds. I guess there's 80, 100 different kinds of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters reload and deplete. They reload and deplete. It's no different than your car runs on gas and you run out of gas, or a battery has a charge and it runs out of charge. Neurotransmitters drive everything in performance. Initiation of force, like your starting speed, off the line speed, explosive muscle force, if you're gonna blow off the line from a 3-point stance or shoot in for a takedown or just anything. Your reaction time, driven by neurotransmitters, all your cognitive function, thinking, focusing, it all depends on those neurotransmitter levels. So they're critical that they're as loaded as possible in the morning when you start your day. On the left is a brain, 8 hours of sleep. That's neurotransmitters, and that all lit up. And on the right-hand side is a person who didn't sleep at all. And that's what you start the day with, and it runs out earlier, and it sure doesn't make it till 3 o'clock when you go to practice. And just some of the things I jotted down, and they were in the video. Decreased mood, your neurotransmitters are down. You're like bummed. You got negative thoughts. You're not feeling it, whatever. Decreased mental performance cognitively or reaction wise. Decreased physical performance. You feel weak, tired, exhausted. Even like your mood swings are run amok. Decreased reaction timing and motivation. That's one of the biggest things with motivation is boy, you can see it happening with neurotransmitter depletion. Next slide. And testosterone is one of our main training hormones, and guys, we have much more testosterone than females, but females have trace levels, and females have different hormone systems than we do, but it's still critical for performance and how you feel when you perform. So this was an all male study and sort of misleads with the female in the slide, but nonetheless, it says testosterone in 5 hours of sleep for a week. And they found in guys in this study that their testosterone levels drop 10 to 15% immediately. So if you guys take a 10 to 15% drop in your testosterone levels, believe me, you do not feel spunky and frisky and ready to kick butt. You feel like weak, tired, not into it. And you're just like, I'm not feeling it today. So next slide, and this is even more important. And I'm going to tell you why very simply. It's a great representation slide. When we do physical work, we release human growth hormone. So say there's a morning workout, you can see there's a little bump there, like a speed bump, and there's an afternoon workout, there's a speed bump, even if it's a hard workout. But look what happens at night about an hour to an hour and a half after you fall asleep. Your body, while we're asleep, our body lets loose this tidal wave of HGH. Human growth hormone is what, since you were a baby, since you were born, doubled and tripled and quadrupled you in size, and you gained and you grew in length and bone growth and muscle growth and putting on muscle mass, all of it, all muscle repair related to HGH. So this is where growth factors are released from the stimulus of training and damaging muscle, for instance, and then you release HGH at night and it repairs the damage and you grow, and so does your capacity, and you become structurally more capable to do more physical work, and you're stronger and faster, and you can jump higher and a million other things. So this wave has been going on since you were born. That's why babies actually sleep, 14 hours a day, 17 hours a day. But anyway, all growth and repair. Right now, you guys are laying down from now until your early 20s, 95% of your bone growth will be laid down during this time. So it's that's even if you think about that, it's pretty important. So let me get back to my next slide. Next slide is HGH and its connection to repairing muscle mass. I showed you damaged muscle mass, and damaged muscle mass has to be repaired. It's an ongoing process, just like damage in the brain and central nervous system has to be repaired. And HGH, while you're asleep, you release the HGH, and here comes the repair. And lucky for you, you don't stay inflamed permanently. Your muscles get inflamed after, for instance, a hard workout or a hard race or game, or hard physical work even. And at night, the HGH repairs it, and it's about 24 hours to 48 hours away. But also important that you have a bedtime. And if you remember that slide I said last time, it's actually about 70 minutes after onset of deep sleep that elite athletes get their big HGH release. And that's when repair starts immediately, 70 minutes after you fall asleep. So say you don't have a bedtime, and every night you go to bed at a different time. Tonight it's 11, the next night it's at 1, the next night it's at 9 o'clock, the next night it's at 3 in the morning. Your body doesn't adjust the HGH release for your lame lifestyle. Your HGH just doesn't, you get some speed bump of HGH, you don't get any repair. Next day you wake up, you're still all inflamed, beat up, banged up, sore, and eventually injured. So 68% less likely to be injured if you have normal sleep habits and good amount of sleep. That's on the bottom there. If you go to my next slide, the first study that showed this wasn't a study on elite athletes or college athletes, or they've all taken this into consideration. It was California State high school football players, an injury study where they linked sleep and the likelihood of becoming injured. And what you've got on that graph is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep a night, and the likelihood of becoming injured. And if you look, the more you sleep, the less likely you are to become injured. And someone will probably, who's a thinker, will ask, well, how come sleeping 5 hours is less likely to cause an injury than 6. There were more people sleeping 6 hours, just like when Dr. Nelson asked how many people would you sleep last night. Well, a lot of people probably were like at about 6, because that's what about the most people can squeak away with when you got homework and studying and all the other things you have to do. So just if you want to think about this, day after day after day of inflammation, sooner or later something's going to give and you're going to be injured and you're going to be out. When all it really took was that you allow your body to recover and repair. Stimulants, if you look at the next slide, we did a huge study on Navy SEALs operators and giving them stimulants to see if it could prolong their abilities to function at a higher level. It was a dead end. You get energy spikes and you sink deeper and deeper. When your teammates and your buddies and your friends are just punching back energy drinks and, heavy coffee use and all those things, just tell them the mistake they're making, because you're already at a deficit. That's why you're doing it. And then you take the stimulants and you use up what little you have left as far as your neurotransmitters. You actually uptake your neurotransmitters with caffeine about 700 times faster than normal. So if you have little to run on, don't use stimulants, because you just vaporize the little bit you have left. About 90 minutes from the time you go to sleep, out from the time you go to sleep. If you go to my next slide, yeah, there, that's good. Somebody coined the phrase "create an electric sundown." The sun goes down, the light goes down, and we feel like, okay, it's nighttime, I need to go to bed. And what happens in the absence of light is melatonin, it's sleep hormone. It comes from a gland just right between your eyes. I heard somebody say once that it's the pineal gland. And what happens is it outputs, it's about the size of a pea. It puts out melatonin. Melatonin is sleep hormone. That's why at night when it gets dark, or if you turn off the lights, you start feeling groggy and sleepy, and eventually you go out. That's sleep hormone. So 90 minutes before sleep, it's okay to turn the lights down. But if you're watching TV, phones, computer desktops, anything where you've seen blue light, which is the frequency of light from all backlit devices, even a minute of that exposure from blue light, which is an artificial form of light, can cause a sleep disturbance enough to not allow you to transition from being awake to falling asleep. So we had to really start to work with people and say, laying in bed watching TV in the dark, huge mistake. If anything, keep the ambient room lighting on so that it dissipates some of the blue light. And then when you're ready to go to sleep, a reasonable time before you go to sleep, turn everything off and turn everything out. Same thing like having dark curtains. It's amazing to me how people can sleep with light coming in a window, but some people can, but not many. So there's some things just to think about. A whole bunch of stressful visual activity, like watching some stressful movie or listening to some crazy ramped up music just before you go to sleep. It's probably not going to set you up. Sugar, even depressants like alcohol and weed, you would think, oh, take the edge off, I can sleep. No, it causes some of the major sleep disturbances. Some top sleep foods on my next slide. Read in the Power Back Diet, sleep inducing foods. There's a whole bunch of them. Take some of those sleep inducers. Biggest sleep inducing food there is turkey. Tryptophan loaded in turkey. Thanksgiving, if you eat a turkey dinner and then you go to run around with all your relatives and do a pickup game of basketball or whatever, maybe you don't do that anymore, but turkey zaps you. It just makes you feel like, makes you feel like you just had somebody pulled the plug on your energy levels. And last but not least, I just go through some of the things I'd like you to try to remember with all the things you heard. And I try to give you guys as much as I can in these talks. So think about this. When we did our studies on elite athletes that were training twice a day, we told them you need to get 8 for a minimum, and at elite level, 9 hours and 15 minutes. So think about that. And I've taken that message all over the world to sport institutes in Austria and China and Japan and everywhere. South Africa. You need regular sleep time. You need a bedtime, guys. Hate to say it, my household, my dad was the AD at my high school. 4 boys, we were all state medalists. My dad said, it's 11 o'clock, your athletes go to bed. I mean, it's like a broken record, but thank God I had a dad who realized that it was important and that we weren't going to stay up all night. And we didn't have all the gadgets and stimulation you guys have now too. So it's probably even more important now than it was then. Temperature of your room. You can't have heat in a room. Boy, it's a huge cause of sleep disturbances. If it goes above 72 degrees, you're probably going to have some problems. I've always enjoyed sleeping in a cool room because I think for breathing, it's better. And, I just think that it sets you up so that your skin temperature, your core temperature are lower, so you don't get a problem. The backlit devices, I'll leave that up to you, but just type in blue light disturbances and you can read about it. There's millions and millions of articles. When I started this project, there were none. So, I mean, this is forefront now. Everybody gets it. Weed and alcohol, huge disruptions. And I'll tell you how it disrupts sleep. It changes your REM sleep, so it's sub-REM. It slows down the REM waves, so you're not in REM sleep anymore. You're in sub-REM. And when you go into sub-REM, especially with weed, it causes another problem. It makes you release a hormone that actually shuts off the release of human growth hormone. And that's something that's, if you're an athlete, and I talk to these guys in pro sports, a lot of them, think they can continue their weed habits out of college and into the pros. And, I just tell them, well, here's your ticket out. It's going to be that you get injured because you're smoking dope and you don't have any, you have growth hormone inhibiting hormone instead of growth hormone. So sleep improves all performance capacities. That's the gift of this. If you want to get more sleep, you'll see it. You'll have more energy. You'll play better. It's universal. It's a funny part when you do Stanford's program. These guys are at Stanford, guys. They're studying and training and doing all the things that anybody would ever want to do at the highest level. It's the most successful sports school of all NCAA sports schools. I hope you realize that. And they find a way to sleep. And a lot of it's because Sherry Ma shined the light on it. Physically active humans require more sleep. So if you're going through a phase of training where you're training more in volume or more in intensity, or you're doing your peaking training, or it's the end of the year and it's been a long season, you're down to the playoffs. Now it's the most important stuff coming. Then you better get even more sleep, or it's a final exam, or it's your college entrance exams or anything else. The more important it is, the more you better get on the sleep page. And the repair of muscle mass, growth of all body systems, and the maintenance of muscle mass, meaning that you keep the amount of mass on your frame. That's all driven by HGH, and that's all from sleep. So no disturbances, good sleep hygiene, big gains. You're on the other page. Proceed at your own risk, and we wish you the best of luck, but you're probably way far from where you could be. So I'll take a couple of questions if anybody wants to ask.
Oh, should I just go? Yeah. All right, so you talked about napping and how 10 minutes can help, but I know like in the stages of sleep, like the first stage is 15 minutes and the full REM is 90 minutes. And like, what is the perfect time to nap? Like, should you nap the whole sleep cycle, or should you nap?
It's a great question. And, guys, I will say this to you. Can you imagine you go to practice at 3:00, or you have your after school activities at 3:00, and you just had a rough day at school, and you go there and you're just feeling it. You're feeling like, oh, I'm wasted. I'm exhausted. If you could just take a 10-minute nap, and the optimal time is 10 to 20 minutes. I'm going to tell you why. After 20 minutes, most people transition to deeper sleep, meaning you start to get the pre-REM brain waves. And what happens then is if you transition to full sleep, meaning you're out, when you wake up, then you're so groggy that you're not alert enough to go do something of high capability. So what happens in a 10 to 20 minute nap is it brings back your alertness levels about 30%. So, okay, it's not the fix, meaning, all right, your central nervous system readiness has dwindled down, but if you take a 10-minute nap, you at least get back your alertness levels by about 30%, and that's huge. I was working with the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is before they won the Super Bowl and beat the Patriots. If I was in Massachusetts, I wouldn't even mention that. But anyway, I was working with those guys, and a lot of guys had sleep issues. So what we would do is they would come to practice, they get all geared up, they get taped, they get all their stuff ready to go. We did a lot of scientific measurements on them. And then it was like kindergarten. They had their mats, like in your sleep mats when you're in kindergarten, kids took little naps. All these gigantic guys laying all over the floor on these little mats. And they would take a 10-minute nap before they would go out to do their warm up, and then their activation, their warm up, and then go into the practice. And the quality of their practices went up just because of that. They had no idea of knowing what those guys are doing before they show up at practice. It's no different than my story when I was talking to you guys about Power Back Diet. I'm telling you about guys coming in with a Coke and a sausage McMuffin, and they're going to do a shoot around or do a practice. Even top people have bad habits. So 10 to 20-minute nap. And it's not going to fix everything, but it's better than not doing it. I can tell you that. Anybody else?
I don't know if you kind of went over this a little bit, but so if you're trying to fix your sleep schedule from like 6 hours to 8 hours, what's the best way to go about that?
Go to bed a half hour earlier to start. Okay, so if your normal bedtime is midnight, start going to. I actually heard Sherry speak about this, and what she would do is she would go in and have one-on-ones with the athletes, and she'd say, "Here's how you do it," because those guys, some of them, they're not going to ask. They're going to just go, "Yeah, I sleep 4 hours, or I go out all night, whatever." So she would say, "Okay, what's your normal bedtime?" And after they found one, then she would say, "Okay, look, go to bed a half hour earlier." It takes time for your body to adjust. So half hour earlier. So if it was midnight for some of you, and I know some of you are up studying at midnight, go to bed 11:30. And then after you adjust to that, and that becomes your bedtime for a while, and it might be 2, 3, 4 months, go to bed another half hour earlier. And I mean, that's the most intelligent way. It's not to try to sleep longer, because you can't. You got to get up in the morning. You got to get ready. You got to get dressed. You got to get, a lot of you take the drive in or the bus. School starts at a certain time. So the best way to do it is to backtrack a half hour until you adjust. And a lot of people may have to adjust dramatically, but I can tell you this, you feel it, and you feel it quick. Within a matter of days, you go like, wow, this is making a huge difference. So that's a good question. I mean, shows you're thinking about it.
I think we have time maybe for one more question. If either a student or anyone else on the call has a question.
I do.
All right, go for it.
So I know you talked about like not trying to have any disturbances while you sleep. So I know it's different for everyone, but is there any like beneficial way to have like a fan or like a outside noise to like get up?
Yeah. They've got a lot of those sleep. Yeah, and it's such an individual thing. Some people have sleep apnea and never find out about it until they're full-blown adults, or 50, 60 years old, or some people snore in their sleep. They just keep waking up, or they gasp for air, or they stop breathing and then they start breathing again. And this is notorious especially in the NFL, some of these huge guys. But I also can say this, some of it's background noise. I mean, some kids are probably living in households where people don't have any concern for, the noise levels that are, bothering somebody else. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I've had kids come up to me after talking at schools and say, "Hey, it's so noisy at our house, I can't sleep." Then you have to maybe try to reason with people, but you can, earplugs. Say there's no curtains in your house and light comes through the windows. Well, you start sleeping in a dark room, that can be a game changer. Get the eye things, the eye covers that you put over your eyes. They have blue light blocking glasses that block blue light you can play with your computer. You can dim your computer. There's apps now to dim your computer to take away the blue light, or on your phone, there's apps. Your phone actually looks sort of pinkish or yellowish or orange. It breaks the blue light so that you can actually use your phones and not get the blue light impact. So, and same thing. Some of those sound apps are fantastic. But I mean, guys, think about this. If you're revved all day long and you get to the end of the day and you're just revving it right to the time you go to sleep, what do you expect is going to happen? It's calm yourselves down. Find a way to make it happen. It's not about, you can make the excuse, they all sound good when you're making them. Take the time to figure out how you're going to get a little bit more sleep. And then when you do, get a little more and get a little more and change your dynamics. I've had kids come back to me years and years later that were great athletes that just tweaked their sleep and had huge breakthroughs. And they said, oh, I don't know if I ever would have got on that page. I just used to struggle and just go and do my best. So anyway, I wish you the best of luck. And I hope you tune in for the next, I thank Brenda and you Wildcats for hosting, and we'll see you back here in January.
Rhonda, any other comments or Dr. Nelson or Life of Wildcat, anything else?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. For those who are ready to hop off, there is the QR code again to scan in. Students and adults or staff are welcome to sign into that to get entered into the watch and also help us track who's attending. We do have a mid-year conference coming up at January 29th. It's a Saturday from 4 to 8 p.m. at Conant High School. We're really looking forward to having the students come and join us, and registration will be open really soon for that. We have a podcast, and our next episode is coming out next week with one of our favorites, Joe Bush, talking about leadership. And again, the next Performance Academy session is going to be Wednesday, January 12th at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we'll be talking about mood and mindset and stress and mental wellness.